Hi, and welcome to the Q. My name is Lisa Maroney. I'm the Director of Business Development, and the goal of this talk show is to be able to ask questions during the quarantine. And this special episode today, we're bringing in people and staff from the Chelmsford Public Schools to join us, along with Megan, Karen, and Jen. As part of our standard circle here, we're introducing some special guests from Chelmsford Public Schools. Couple of comments from myself of business development. Today's episode includes a discussion about workforce and parents working from home remotely while having school-age children underfoot, and what that means continuing forward from Jen's conversation of our last episode about maintaining some regularity of routines and schedules and doing the best we can to adapt and maintain some level of normalcy. So I'd like to introduce Laurie McCarron from Chelmsford Public Schools. Laurie is a parent support leader as well as the Chelmsford Special Ed Parent Advisory Council member, which some of our other guests are as well. Also for today, Allie Barnes, Chelmsford SEPAC and Family Child Care Association director, if you will. We'll get into more specifics in a moment. And also Larraine Wilson, the K-12 coordinator of social emotional learning and counseling. So what I'd like to do is open it up for conversation in regard, I'll turn it to Jen first, but let's start talking about how Chelmsford Public Schools and the members here with us today can help parents and workers and parents at home and children trying to adapt together in a closed, secure environment and trying to create some normalcy in some level.
Thanks, Lisa. And first I want to say, well done to you on getting through all of those names and titles, because a lot of them were a mouthful, and our participants will, I think, correct us on their titles, and you'll see their titles up on their graphics as well. So, excuse me, Laurie and Allie and Larraine, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I think I was looking to bring in for this episode perspective from some folks who can provide resources to parents on sort of coping with being at home with their school-age children and, managing remote learning and all of the challenges that come with that. But also many parents are also working remotely at the same time. So there are some specific challenges that go along with that. And then when you bring the two of them together, I think you've got, just challenges compounding challenges, right? And Allie and Laurie especially can bring in perspective of managing, children with special education needs as well. That's where they really specialize with SEPAC. So I'm gonna really turn it over to you guys first, and maybe we'll start with Laurie, because Laurie, you and I had a nice conversation a couple weeks ago just about how we might be able to bring some resources to parents of kids when they're home with their kids. So why don't you give us a little outline of what SEPAC is and what SEPAC does and what kinds of resources you can offer to parents.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me here today. The Chelmsford SEPAC was reestablished in 2018. Currently, we have 4 board members, 2 co-chairs who are Allison Barnes and Kristen Erickson, and Viaz Sansgiri, who is our treasurer, as well as our web tech support, and myself as secretary. And the SEPAC stands for Special Education Parent Advisory Council. It is mandated under Massachusetts law, Chapter 71B, and recently supported by the state of Massachusetts, highlighting a SEPAC Awareness Month in November. The role of the SEPAC is to advise the district on matters that pertain to the safety and education of our students with disabilities, their families, and all interested parties. SEPAC works with the special education director, the special education assistant director, school committee members, and parents, collaboratively as a bridge of communication for resources and support. And during COVID-19, SEPAC continues to provide a voice and support for that collaboration, understanding both sides of the parents and the district and the challenges that we face. Amy Reese, the Director of Student Services, reached out specifically to ask, how can the district help support parents? And that's really key. Specific feedback from parents has been welcomed by school committee members, by teachers, by principals, and really want to emphasize that right now we just need patience and communication going back and forth throughout this time. I think Allie Barnes was going to say a little bit more with our specific cases in Chelmsford.
Yeah, so again, thank you. I'm one of the co-chairs for SEPAC and also the president of the Family Child Care Association. So just some quick background. I've been working in childcare and education in some form the last 25 years or so. So specific to the children that we're representing, it's a little bit more stressful for the families who have children with special needs. In addition to trying to fit in some academics throughout the day, they're also having to provide one-on-one support. There are behaviors that interrupt academic times. The parents are now having to modify assignments that usually is something that a teacher or a specialist does. And that would mean like they might have to do a different quantity or instruct different, or maybe even do something completely off of Google Classroom. And that just takes a lot more time and effort, in addition to having to coordinate with therapists and service providers, not just the gen ed teacher. So it's really, it's a lot to take on. And kind of our takeaway for how SEPAC is providing support back to the parents is we're encouraging people to first take care of your basic needs, including your mental health and your children's mental health. And once those supports are in place, then you can really start looking at the academic piece. So we're really encouraging you to take a look at yourself and your family, put your own oxygen mask on and support your family, making sure that you have, your food, shelter, health and safety issues. I know we have Jen, we can reach out locally if you need help getting any of those things, but there's also a statewide number, 211, you can dial, that's open 24/7 if you need help with any of those things. And then I don't want to double step on what Larraine's probably going to address later with mental health, but just having an awareness that we are right now living through a traumatic event, like it's happening now in real time, and that affects your life in every way. So specifically dealing with children, helping them name their emotions so that they can have ownership over it, providing choices and creating a routine that works for your family. Those are some hands-on things that you can do now to help support them.
Some really great points, Allie. Thank you. So maybe we'll jump to Larraine now. And maybe Larraine, you can give us an idea of how, from the perspective of the public schools, you are reaching out and supporting parents, particularly parents of children with special education needs.
Absolutely, Jen. Thank you. First, I just want to say that I'm a parent myself, and we 6 children at home. We have 6-year-old twins. We have 2 teenagers and then 2 young adults. And so we are both trying to work remotely while also trying to do some form of homeschooling. And it certainly has been a challenge. And I think that's the case with many of the counselors and the social workers and the school psychologists that I work with in Chelmsford. I think the first thing that we did as a district is Dr. Lang and Amy Reese gathered myself and Peggy Gump, who is the director of nursing, and we really just brainstormed about, okay, what do we do first? And we had each school really come up with a list of families who had been relying on the school for support for some of those basic needs that Allie was talking about, and really reaching out to those families personally to make sure that they had what they needed, that they knew that there was grab and go food available daily. And now the hours of that are 4 p.m. to 5:30. We're also working with Table of Plenty. to continue the program that we were working on at Harrington School, but also expanding that to other families that we're sort of coming across through our outreach efforts who might need some assistance with food on the weekends. And Nancy Antolini, who is the Director of Food Service, has been so flexible with helping us. And for the first 3 weeks, Peggy, Julia Vogel, who is the social worker at Parker, and I were meeting daily just to go through the lists. And essentially every school had a list, and then they were able to fill out a Google form that was confidential, so that we could see who the families were that were at highest risk or were reporting needs when they were being contacted, and sort of pooling our resources. And some of that looked like reaching out to Jen and seeing what was available in terms of toiletries and necessities. We also worked with Katie's Closet and had about 20 families taken care of that way in terms of just basic necessities that folks had. I would say for families at home, we understand that you are all sort of, as Ali said, living through a traumatic event, as are we in our own homes. And I think keeping your expectations of your child and yourself really reasonable, and thinking about each day as a new day, and thinking about what you can do on that day to practice some self-care and also help your child with their emotions. And as we shifted from sort of providing enrichment to more remote learning, we did see, some more emotions as kids got back into the classroom and were seeing their teacher and hadn't seen them in a few weeks. And I know at home I was experiencing that with my own children, particularly my youngest children. And while it's a wonderful thing to be able to see your teacher on a screen or hear their voice, it's also very, very emotional for kids to try to understand as much as they can that school is now at home, and it's not an easy thing for young children to understand. So I think if you are experiencing a crisis, please know that the school counselors and school psychologists are working every day. They're available by email, phone. Some are doing Google meetings with parents or children. We are working on a counseling protocol for online counseling and sort of trying to figure out what that means. Some of our students are also making their own transitions with their outside therapists to telehealth and meeting with them online, which is a new experience for them and for us. But those connections continue to be so vital for us to serve our students, particularly with social emotional disabilities, or students who have issues with social pragmatics and things like that, making sure that they're getting what they need from us as a school system, and also from some of their outside providers.
So Larraine, I just want to comment. I am almost a little bit speechless. We all know there's a lot of things happening, like a lot of dynamic changes that are very unique in coping and managing this COVID-19 crisis, but it is extraordinary how much effort is going on behind the scenes to support families and students in the same way of what you've been talking about. Really, essentially, crisis management skills are at its core of needs right now, and everything that you're doing to provide support. Thank you for sharing all of that information. It's a lot of things that I didn't even know about myself.
Lisa, one of the things that Larraine talked about, which kind of reminded me of how your whole idea for this show started was, she mentioned kids transitioning to being able to start to see their teachers in an online, platform or virtual platform, and how that can be a little bit confusing for them. And it just makes me think of the conversations we had about you and your mom, and trying to, navigate that tricky situation, which we talked about in a little bit in our first episode.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if maybe we can bring Karen in here now, and kind of get some guidance on how, from that perspective, we can keep kids connected to not only to their classroom friends and their teachers, but also to their family members, extended family members that they're not able to see right now. I hear the term social distancing, and it really just sort of makes me cringe, because really what we're after is physical distancing while maintaining social connections. So Karen, maybe you can talk a little bit about, ways in which that we can maintain those social connections while being physically distant.
Okay, thanks, Jen. It was interesting to hear Allie talk about how we are living through a traumatic event right now. And for us, it's really hard to imagine, because we've read about traumatic events in history books. And even, I was reading a book about World War II, and I felt like, wow, they didn't have food. And now I'm wondering, when are the grocery store shelves going to be empty? So we're kind of living something that we've only read about. So my advice about staying in touch for kids they should reach out to their grandparents. I think that they have some really good stories to tell, because while this is new for us and our generation, I think that our grandparents have had really difficult times in their lives that we've only read about. And it might be therapeutic for the grandparents to talk about it and for the grandchildren to hear about it. And it's like living history to talk to your grandparents. So there's an academic benefit to this really warm, loving relationship between grandparents and their children. An example is my mother-in-law is approaching 90 and lives by herself. And we were asking her, what do you remember about the Spanish flu? And while she was too young to have lived it and remembered it, she had older siblings who told stories about it. She remembers having a cleaning company come in and scrub down their walls with bleach. And it was just so interesting to hear her perspective on traumatic events. So I think that our grandparents can be good resources for us during this time.
Thank you, Karen. That's excellent. I try to do small steps with keeping my young adult children, they're in their early 20s, connected to my mother during elderly isolation, and sometimes phone calls are just not, just don't feel sufficient enough. But keeping that contact, that open communication amongst family members during difficult times, particularly in times of crisis like this, it's a learning experience of where our resources are, such as what we're talking about today. I've already learned a lot myself. I would like to maybe try to hear from Megan a little bit on some other ideas of how families can introduce new ideas of activities with food or recipes or other ways to involve learning and nutrition, because it seems like all of us here today are exchanging information that's new, a new way to get news information out that's more relevant to our community and the needs here, and how Chelmsford Public Schools can integrate with all different levels and layers of people that are looking for, we're all just trying to do some outreach. And I know I'm getting a lot of inquiries every day from businesses. No one was really prepared for something like this. And it's a great time to make some new connections and try to learn things in a different way.
I think that's great. I love this panel for this reason. And everyone sort of brought up topics that I sort of get self-focused on your own family and not realizing what other people are going through. And the interesting idea of sharing ideas of what, people who lived through traumatic events have gone through and what their coping mechanisms were, what they were doing. My husband jokes that I should have been a farmer back in like the 1800s because I love gardening, I love growing my own food, I love cooking from scratch. My grandmother passed away a few months ago. She was 101, and I talked to her a lot about the events that she lived through. And I learned how to garden through her. And she talked about the victory gardens and how, starting to learn to grow your own food is kind of an interesting time to do that. And it's very simple. There's a lot of online resources for that, which I'm happy to share. But also just taking this time to cook with your kids, cooking dinner. I feel a little bit like I run a Waffle House. I have 3 kids at home and a husband, and everyone's, trying to stay in a routine of breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks in between. But teaching kids how to prepare their own meals and snacks. A great sensory activity for all ages is even washing fruits and vegetables. Kids as young as 2 or anyone can use a little vegetable brush like this. Washing the fruit, having your hands in the water, that's kind of a fun activity. And just having them touching the fruits and vegetables is great. Basic knife skills is a great fine motor activity to work on as well. You can get these little kid-safe knives from Amazon, super cheap. You can teach kids, how to properly cut an onion, how to cut up a vegetable, and just safety with that. And there's also videos and tutorials on how, the best way to teach that is if you had access to, a grandparent who had a special recipe, doing a Zoom call and having them teach you how to make that recipe, keeping those family traditions going. This is a great time to do that. And also we talked last week about empowerment. Kids right now, are kind of stuck at home, but you can say, if you nourish your body with these foods, you can get ready for your sports season. You can keep your mind sharp. You can work on your mood. You can work on behavior with putting the right foods in your body and kind of getting rid of those, highly processed foods that can affect negatively acne, mood, behavior, all of those things, and immunity at this point.
Those are some excellent points that I didn't even think of. I probably need a lesson on how to properly cut vegetables so that I'm not wasting any of the vegetable and saving a lot of time. I bet you I'm doing it all backwards myself. So I just wanted to kind of open it up in general. If anyone else from the public school guest attendees have any other comments of other things that have been said here in today's episode.
Laurie and I just want to make sure that parents know that they can reach out to SEPAC and to the parent support group if they're looking for resources, if they just need somebody to talk to. Both of those groups are available online on Facebook. And SEPAC has a website, chelmsfordcpac.weebly.com, where we post a lot of information. And one of the things we're working on right now is we've created a presentation that addresses a lot of the questions parents have raised related to schooling and how that looks at home. And we're hoping to put that together to do a virtual meeting this Thursday at 7 p.m. So once we have that solidified, we'll spread the word there. But we just want to make people aware that we have some more information we'd like to share.
Allie, will that be something that's sort of aired in real time, or will you kind of record it and then send it out?
We are working out the details. I'm hoping that is something we can do in live time and record. Okay, great. Yep.
So I just wanted to add, earlier when Allie was speaking, she talked a little bit about, she says, refer to a routine at home and whatever that looks like for your family. That can be very different. I mean, some children might benefit from a color-coded schedule that is predictable, routine, every day. They need that. They need maybe picture supports or whatever it is. And then other families maybe having a more free range sort of approach and a more unschooling versus a homeschooling approach. And I think that you have to do what feels right for your family. And, you're juggling your own needs as a parent, as many of us working parents, and your child's needs. And I think that finding that right balance. And I loved last Friday, our kindergarten twins, their assignment, one of their assignments was to play a board game with their family. And I thought, it's Friday, that's a perfect thing for us to do. And so we picked out something that was age appropriate for them, and we played a game together. And we have been doing more of that, even with our teenagers after the little ones go to bed, spending a couple of nights a week playing a quick game of cards or Rummy Cube or Bananagrams or whatever your favorite games are as a family. I think that is powerful too. And that will sort of help you get through this time together and really seeing yourselves as a team. And that this is a marathon and not a sprint. It's going to go on for a while. And I think the not knowing how long it will be, what's going to happen, that's really hard for some of our children, particularly children who might be on the autism spectrum. It's really, really hard not to have those hard and fast answers for them. But I think if you're spending time together as a family, you're taking the approach that feels best for you, then you're doing enough and you are enough. And I think often as parents, we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we are doing. We're thinking so much about, oh, I didn't do this or I didn't do that. But being gentle with yourselves during this time, I think, is extremely important.
Yeah, that's such important stuff, and particularly around routines. We talked about this. This is something we talked about last week in our first episode, was the importance of establishing routines. And I think, for parents who are working remotely at home with children who are, learning remotely, routines are absolutely essential, because it can mean the difference between, kids sort of having expectations laid out for them and knowing sort of what comes next. Mm-hmm. And so even if they do need the parents' assistance with something, the parents not sort of trying to scramble to find something for the child to do before they have to quick jump on their next Zoom video call, right? Instead, they can say to the child, so this is what you just did, and so now it's time for this, and so you're going to set up and get this done, and then when you're finished with that, then it'll be time for this. And as you incorporate those routines from day to day, and particularly for those kids who have special education needs, who really, really rely on those routines, it becomes more important. But I think also the point that you bring up about being gentle with yourself, right? Because it's a hard time for everybody. And so there's sort of that fine line between wanting to make sure you can establish those routines and stick to it, and then giving yourself a break when you can't. And when everybody says, you know what, it's too much and it's overwhelming, that everybody just takes a break when they need to.
So I did want to make one point about, Jen, what you had said earlier is this is really a focus on physical distancing and not social distancing. And I think we need to remember also that we're very fortunate that a lot of parents have access to technology, but some people do not have access to technology. And if that's the case, families can reach out to the SEPAC, they can reach out to the principals, they can call the school, they can call the superintendent, and we will help get that technical support needed in the home. There's also parents like me that struggle with Google Classroom, which is what my kids are using. I have 4 children, and one at each level, one in high school, one in middle school, 2 in elementary school. So kind of juggling the Google Classroom with all of them has been a little challenging. Again, communication is key. Reaching out to the teachers is great, because they are also in this with you. So I did want to bring up, I really want to emphasize this is a physical distancing and not so much social distancing. For those that struggle with communication online, somehow reach out, get somebody else to reach out for you, and we will help you.
Excellent. Thank you, Laurie. Everyone's comments have just been so well spoken and great information, much needed. I think we can kind of wrap it up at this point. I know that each of you have provided great referrals of other information, where to find other pieces of information, as well as your own direct contact. So thank you very much for coordinating and participating in this week's version of the Q. It's been wonderful to meet all of you. Thank you so much for being here in support of the town of Chelmsford and Chelmsford residents, and we would love to have you come back on again soon, maybe as a recurring guest, because we know that things are changing daily, and we need to really utilize our network of information and keep ourselves informed and well connected. So thank you very much for everyone. It was great to talk with you.
Yeah, this was terrific. Thank you, everybody. Join us next week, where we'll continue the discussion on resources for parents of school-age children. Larraine Wilson will be back with us, along with Director of Nursing Peggy Gump and Parker Middle School social worker Julia Vogel. We'd love to answer any questions that you may have. You can send questions to us ahead of time to my email address at jmelanson@chelmsfordma.gov. Until next time, we'll see you on the queue.